So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Neurocalm Fatigue Summit. And I'm delighted to have with me tonight Dr. Neil Nathan, who I know many of you will already know about. Dr. Nathan has dedicated over 50 years to an effort of integrating and understanding the physical aspects of disease with the emotional, energetic, and spiritual components that he now understands as the underpinning of all healing efforts. He's board certified in family medicine and pain management and is a founding diplomat of the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine. He has a deep knowledge of not only conventional medicine, but osteopathic manipulation, acupuncture, hypnosis, homeopathy, therapeutic touch, prolotherapy, herbal and botanical remedies, and Reichian therapy. A very impressive profile indeed, Neil. Perhaps you'd like to tell the audience a bit about your understanding and the genesis of your kind of medical relationship with fatigue conditions.
Sure. So at the time that I really began to learn about this, I was the medical director of a clinic, hospital-based clinic that was a pain clinic. And we began to see in the early 1980s a new condition, which was then called fibrositis. We now call it fibromyalgia. And we didn't know what to do with it. We didn't understand it. Our patients who had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are very, very closely related. Those patients had multi-systemic symptoms, and yet we didn't have any explanation of where they came from. So many people who were looking at those patients thought that it was psychological. But no psychological treatment did much, whether it was therapy or whether it was using pharmaceuticals, it didn't do much. So it became obvious to someone who was really looking at it that we don't have the answers, but something else is causing these symptoms. And over the years, back in the early 90s, we began to learn about things like adrenal, thyroid, sex hormones, magnesium deficiency, a wide group of biochemical perturbations actually caused it. And if you treated them, these people got better. So there was a small group of us back then who were successfully treating it. And much of the medical profession was still telling these folks, it's in your head. Sorry about that. There's nothing I can do for you. This evolved over the years so that we were able to help initially the vast majority of people who came to us. But over time, the patients that I started to see with fatigue were sicker and didn't respond the same way to the same treatments that had been so effective in the early 90s. And we began to realize that we were missing something. We were missing initially Lyme disease with its co-infections, and by 2005, we learned about mold toxicity being a major player. So for those folks who have chronic fatigue syndrome and or fibromyalgia, which goes along with it quite well, those are two major players misdiagnosed as chronic fatigue, which can often lead to tremendous benefits in people who will look for it. So that's how I got started.
Wow. And now, well, what percentage roughly would you say of patients with chronic fatigue, ME/CFS, those kind of conditions, would you suspect are really suffering from, mold exposure or Lyme co-infections?
A very hard question to answer. But I'll refer you to a paper written by Dr. Joe Brewer, is an infectious disease specialist from Kansas City, who in 2013 looked at his chronic fatigue patients and took 112 of them and measured mold toxins in their urine. 92% had mold toxins and responded by getting cured to treatment. So it's way higher than most people would realize. I don't know if I could say that all people with chronic fatigue have that as the cause, but a very high percent, to the point that if you have or a loved one has chronic fatigue, I would definitely look at mold toxicity. I would definitely look for Lyme disease. I would look for viral infections and all the other underpinnings that we're talking about here.
Mm. And what's your view on the theory around autonomic nervous system activity here? There's a lot of people who basically see the autonomic nervous system as the primary driver of the condition. What's your view of that?
Well, I don't think it's a theory. I think it's well demonstrated at this point. But I would caution everybody from looking at a cause of any condition. And I don't even care what it is, certainly for chronic fatigue. So, for example, Dr. Teitelbaum, who I work with closely, identified 180 biochemical perturbations that could cause chronic fatigue. So, to try to name one is really doing anybody an injustice. To try to blame the autonomic nervous system exclusively, also doing it injustice. I work at this point very, very closely with people who have become especially sensitive to their environment. They react strongly to things like light, sound, touch, chemicals, food, and EMF. Many of them, most, have chronic fatigue syndrome and or fibromyalgia. And the underpinnings of sensitivity would be the same as for chronic fatigue, which is yes, what we call the autonomic or the vagal nerve system, but also the limbic system, also mast cell activation. Those three conditions create the sensitivity that our patients have acquired. So is the autonomic system important in chronic fatigue? Absolutely. Does everyone with chronic fatigue have it? No. So I don't think we can use it as the underlying concept that ties it all together. I think the medical profession has gotten used for a long time to a very linear, simplistic view of illness, that one thing causes one condition and I diagnose that and I treat that. That doesn't apply to almost any chronic condition I can name. We have got to think in more complex terms now, that we have to think biochemically, physiologically, structurally, energetically, emotionally. All of those things shape what a human being is, and they all contribute to an illness.
Yes, absolutely. So the view of the human being there is almost a complexity theory type view, isn't it, of systems in convergent patterns and divergent patterns producing effects. And
Correct.
I guess for the individual sufferer, that can produce an incredibly complex picture. So for people who can't afford tests and find it difficult to access those kind of resources, what would you give them as practical advice, what they could do, where they could start where they are without the barrage of tests required?
Very difficult question. Honestly, somehow, at least basic testing has to be in place, or we're just guessing. And that's not doing justice to the patient, and it's not doing justice to the healing process. Forgive me, but as a physician, I need to know what I'm treating.
Yes, sure.
Am I a good guesser? I'm told that I am. But I don't want to rely on my guessing if I'm working with a human being who needs my help. I want to know what I'm doing. So I would urge people to get at least basic testing for what they need. Now, if you just want to talk about the causes of chronic fatigue, I did write a book which is still currently available called Healing is Possible, in which I go over all of the main causes, diagnosis, and treatment, which could be helpful for them. Subsequently, I've written another book called Toxic, Heal Your Body from mold toxicity, Lyme disease, chemical sensitivity, and other environmental illnesses, which is the underpinning of a lot of people with chronic fatigue as well. Those would be a starting point to really read, study, and understand what you're really looking at. But if I were to be guessing, I'm really doing someone a disservice. And for that reason, I understand your question. My heart goes out to people who don't have the finances to do what's necessary, but almost everyone can borrow from a friend, a family member, someone, a little bit of money. These are not very expensive tests. But once I know what you have, then I can do a good job of treating you.
Mm.
So that's got to be the starting point.
And
Good diagnosis.
could you take an approach whereby you say, what does a healthy body need, and start implementing that, even if you don't exactly know exactly what's going on? Are there some foundational life practices like, I don't know, organic diet, adequate hydration, proper sleep cycles, light exposure? In your experience, is that a good way to go for people?
Yes and no. Mostly no. Because, for example, I've already said that a large percentage of people with chronic fatigue will have mold toxicity. You can't fix that with lifestyle or diet or eating organic or doing good things. That's good for bodies. But when a body is poisoned, you have to get the poison out for the body to be able to respond. The body has remarkable healing abilities if we remove the impediments. So if you have a toxin or an infection and you're not actively working at getting rid of it, you can do everything you want and you're not going to really make much difference at all. So, not really. Again, I kind of come back to, you really have to understand the root cause of what is creating these symptoms and not treat symptoms.
Yes. And what's the implications for public health policy of what you've been, the journey you've been on? Because, you know, you're contrasting this complexity sensitive view with, you know, the kind of view of contemporary modern medicine, one issue, cause, treat it with something. What would you do? What would you advise for a kind of revolution in the way that we think about health and the way that we think about illness for the 21st century, if you had the capacity or the opportunity to do that?
Well, I've spent my life trying to change medical consciousness, and the problem is it's a slow process. The history of science, the history of medicine is that new ideas take about 20 years or longer to be accepted. New technology, new medications, that gets fast-tracked so that there's money involved there. There's no money in a new idea. So unfortunately, and I've learned to have to be a very patient about changing consciousness. But it's a growing process as more and more people recognize that Lyme and mold are major illnesses and that environmental toxicity is wreaking havoc on our planet, causing all of this. Then we can make change. But consciousness has to change first. And unfortunately, that is by its very nature not an easy task.
It's not. But thinking about consciousness brings me to my intense curiosity about the energetic and spiritual components of healing that you've shown expertise in. So I'd love you to reflect on that for the audience as well.
Sure. And for those who are interested, last year I wrote a book called Energetic Diagnosis, which talks about how to perceive energies in people intuitively and using a variety of medical devices. So to improve our ability to make diagnoses. To answer your question more specifically, most people, having treated hundreds of thousands over 50 years, most people would like there to be a physical cause for whatever their symptoms are. And if there is, that's great. So a vitamin deficiency, a hormonal imbalance, a structural thing that can be treated with osteopathic manipulation or something of that nature, that's great. That's a simple fix. That person doesn't have to invest a lot into that process. It's just, okay, I'm a little bit out of whack and you're going to put me back in whack, which is not actually a word, but you're going to help me to get well by fixing the things that you can discern are wrong with me. That's great. And that works a lot. For many people, that's what we need to help them to heal. But for some people who their illness is kind of deeper ingrained, they have to look at emotional, energetic, and spiritual issues that are underpinning this. Because for some people, their being will not allow them to heal on a physical plane until they address the emotional, I will call them blocks, energetic blocks, or spiritual blocks that are preventing them from getting well. And that's how the body gives us symptoms. It's not trying to hurt us, it's trying to inform us about what's wrong. They're messages from our higher self, from our being, to us going, hey, you've got fatigue or pain, or you name the symptom. It has meaning. And you're the owner of this body, you've got the user's manual, you need to get to the bottom of it. And so I think the role of healthcare providers is to help patients understand the meaning, that what is my body trying to tell me? Because most people aren't physicians. They don't know how bodies work. And so that's our job, to help them discern the meaning. So that's I think the role that we're talking about here.
How do you work with patients to build that intuition? Do you help people learn how to tune into those messages and to be able to discern the meaning for themselves?
I do. I think people are all intuitive. I think everyone has what I will call gifts of perception. We all know that some people have a better palate, or people who are wine connoisseurs can discern flavors that I can't. There are people who make perfumes who can discern scents that other people can't. There are people who are musically inclined, whose ears can pick up nuances that other people's can't. Those are on the basic sensory level. In the same way, we pick up information from other beings. It's our birthright. We were born and learned to do that. In even primitive societies, we can walk into a room and literally read what's happening to people consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously. Now, it's not part of our societal structure to encourage that. Most people who have these gifts have been discouraged from using them or working with them or paying attention to them. We all have them to varying degrees. So part of my work with patients has been to honor their own perceptions. It's okay. You have perceptions, and it's your body. What are you feeling? What are you noticing? There's no reason to discard what you are perceiving, ever. So that honoring that and then noticing, did that perception help you in any form of interactions with other people, in understanding something? The answer is probably. And so if we can simply get back to honoring our own perceptions, that's a simple, basic thing that all beings can do. It doesn't cost you any money.
And that's very creaturely, isn't it? I mean, I'm thinking here of animals that discern, environmental crises before they arrive, like, tsunamis or whatever. Maybe that's down to vibration, or maybe it's down to some intuitive, creaturely attunement to the planet. When you start thinking about spirituality, do you make a distinction there? Are there moves into a different register other than the creaturely, or is it just an extension of that?
I think it's an extension of that, but I don't think of spirituality as relating to religion per se, although for some people it does, but rather what gives any human being meaning and purpose in their life. It's about meaning and purpose. And that's what gets everyone up in the morning. What am I getting up to do? If I'm ill, I don't want to make being sick my life's purpose. That doesn't feed our essence. That doesn't feed our soul or our spirit. That's just exhausting. So we have to be in touch with things that gave us meaning and purpose before we got sick, or discover new things that give our life meaning and purpose, because that's what get us going. That is the essence of the healing energy that will eventually help people to get well. If I can't count the number of people where I've asked that question, what gives your life meaning and purpose? And so many patients have gone, gosh, I don't know. And then I go, oh boy, we have a problem here. I don't actually say those words out loud, but I'm thinking it and thinking, oh boy, we have to get back to square one. This being needs to appreciate why they're here on the planet so that they can move forward. To not have any idea just tells us, okay, you really have lost touch with your essence, and that has got to be a part of your healing process.
Mm. I suspect for myself, and I'm not a doctor, but I've had a long relationship with fatigue myself in the past. I certainly, in my case, I would say that the fatigue called me into a deeper sense of purpose. It was a very wise message that took me much deeper in my own life path, my own evolution. And I suspect the same is true for many others. And certainly, anecdotally, that's something I hear quite a lot from people who've got fatigue. And it seems to me that finding a purpose is in itself, even finding a purpose in the illness, is in itself a remarkable healing moment.
Yes, absolutely agree. For my patients who heal to the deepest level, they're the ones who find that. They're the ones who are either looking for or suddenly inspired to understand that, oh, this illness wasn't intended to make me miserable. It was intended to wake me up to deeper meaning in my life. And looking for that or even be appreciating it is really, really helpful. For those people who don't find meaning in their illness, it's simply a slog. It's, oh boy, got to get up today, and oh boy, got to do this, and I don't have the energy for it, and I'm going to disappoint so many people, including myself, and then that becomes someone's life, and that's not living. So no matter what you have, and no matter how you have been impacted by it, it behooves anyone to start to look for a deeper meaning. Like, what do I get out of it? My body is being asked to change or learn or grow. So what is that growth going to look like? And indeed, the people who've looked at their illnesses that way, when they come out the other side, from my perspective, are spiritually much more attuned. They're fully alive. They're bringing to the table so much, and they're almost all in a pay it forward mode, which is, this is what I've learned. Gosh, I want to share that with the whole world.
Absolutely. That's my observation too, and my own personal experience. I certainly feel that for myself. And, I've said many times that the illness was my greatest teacher. It was a mode of awakening, as you say. I think awakening is a fantastic word to use here. It was an incredible awakening, not an easy one. It's not one I would have chosen, but certainly now I'm grateful for it, which sounds like a very strange thing to say, but I'm deeply grateful, and I know many other people who've had it or got it who relate to it that way. And if nothing else, it's a very resourceful framing, I think, in terms of how you set up the reticular activating system in the brain and what you're actually looking for in your life. If you believe it's meaningful, you actually experientially, it creates a different way of living with it entirely, doesn't it?
It does. I've had 2 serious illnesses in my life, and what I have taken away from it is a profound appreciation for what I have, the gifts that I've been given, an increased perception of joy in my life for that appreciation. Would I have wished my illnesses on anybody? Absolutely not. But the body and my perception, God move in mysterious ways. Again, I don't understand why certain people get certain things. I don't understand why I got what I got. But it's very helpful to reframe it as really appreciating what you have. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you.
And the transformative power of gratitude is a lovely thought to end this conversation with. And I want to express my gratitude to you, Neil, not just for doing this interview, which I'm very grateful for, but just for the whole way that you've contributed, the work you've done. And I know there are many audience members who really appreciate your work. So I would just want to thank you on behalf of everyone listening in. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Neil.